For centuries, Jews have been called a family. But how true is that genetically? With the rise of DNA science, researchers have unlocked secrets buried for millennia. Secrets hidden in ancient graves, whispered through bloodlines, and encoded in the genes of modern Jews. What does the latest genetic research reveal? Does it confirm the traditional story of Jewish origins? Or does it challenge everything we thought we knew? This isn't just about science. It's about identity, history, and a story that spans thousands of years. Until recently, Jewish ancestry was a matter of tradition and historical records. People traced their roots through family stories, religious texts, and cultural heritage. But as DNA testing advanced, scientists found themselves asking a remarkable question. Could the vast and diverse Jewish population across the world be more than just a metaphorical family? Could genetics prove that Jews, despite being scattered across continents for centuries, still share a deep biological connection? To answer this, researchers turned to ancient DNA, the preserved genetic material of people who lived thousands of years ago. The focus: the ancient Israelites. Who were they? And what can their DNA tell us about the origins of modern Jews? At key archaeological sites in Israel, such as Megiddo and Abel Beth Makkah, scientists recovered the genetic profiles of individuals who lived during the time of the ancient kingdom of Israel. These people, identified as Israelites, carried a genetic signature that was neither entirely isolated nor entirely uniform. In other words, they weren't a single, homogeneous group, but rather a blend of ancestral populations that had lived in the region for thousands of years. The DNA analysis revealed something fascinating. About 55% of their genetic makeup came from Levantine Neolithic farmers, an ancient population that had lived in the region for millennia. Another 30% of their ancestry traced back to the Natufians, a proto-agriculturalist people of the Levant. The remaining 15% showed connections to ancient Iranian-related groups, migrants from Mesopotamia, who had mixed with the local population. This genetic composition proves something significant. The Israelites were not an isolated tribe. They were the product of migrations and mixtures, shaped by thousands of years of movement and settlement in the Fertile Crescent. But what does this mean for the Jewish people today? If ancient Israelites had a distinct genetic signature, can we find it in modern Jews? To answer this, scientists compared the DNA of ancient Israelites to modern Jewish populations around the world, and the results were astonishing. Despite thousands of years of exile, migration, and living among different host populations, Jewish communities still carry a genetic imprint that links them to their ancient homeland. However, this link isn't uniform across all Jewish groups. Some communities, like Iraqi and Kurdish Jews, have the closest genetic connection to the ancient Israelites, showing the least amount of genetic drift. Others, like Ashkenazi Jews, have experienced more admixture, but still retain a core Middle Eastern genetic component. This finding reinforces a crucial point. While Jewish communities have mixed with local populations to varying degrees, the underlying genetic thread connecting them to the ancient Israelites has never disappeared. This revelation isn't just about ancestry. It has profound implications for history and identity. For centuries, Jews have maintained traditions that trace back to their biblical ancestors, from language to religious practices. Now, science confirms that their biological lineage also extends back to those very same people. The Jewish people, dispersed across continents, speaking different languages, and shaped by different cultures, still share a genetic heritage that ties them to their ancient past. But genetics alone doesn't define identity. DNA can tell us where we come from, but it doesn't dictate culture, beliefs, or values. Jewish identity has always been about more than blood. It's about shared history, traditions, and a sense of belonging. The story of Jewish origins isn't just written in DNA. It's written in the Torah, in the echoes of prayer, in the resilience of communities that have endured through millennia. For centuries, theories about Jewish origins have been debated by historians, religious scholars, and skeptics alike. Some believe Jews were a distinct, unbroken lineage from the ancient Israelites, while others argued that Jewish communities were formed through widespread conversions and had little to no genetic connection to the Middle East. But with the rise of modern genetics, we no longer have to rely on speculation. Scientists can now trace ancestry through DNA itself. So, what does science actually say? Has it confirmed what many believed, or has it rewritten the story of Jewish history? One of the most persistent myths was that Jewish communities around the world were disconnected, genetically separate from one another, and mostly assimilated into their surrounding populations. This assumption came from the fact that Jews lived in vastly different regions, from Poland to Yemen, from Morocco to India. With such diversity in appearance and culture, many assumed there was no single genetic origin. But recent studies tell a completely different story. When scientists mapped the genomes of Jewish populations, they discovered something remarkable. No matter where Jewish communities had settled, their DNA still showed strong genetic continuity with one another and with the Middle East. From Ashkenazi Jews in Europe to Sephardic Jews in North Africa and Mizrahi Jews in the Middle East, all groups shared common genetic markers that traced back to ancient Israelite populations. However, the data also revealed a new layer of complexity. While Jewish communities remained genetically connected, they also showed varying degrees of admixture with local populations. For example, Ashkenazi Jews, who lived in Europe for over 1,000 years, carry around 30 to 50% European ancestry. This likely came from intermarriage during the early years of the Jewish presence in Europe, followed by centuries of endogamy that preserved their unique genetic structure. Similarly, Sephardic Jews, who lived in Spain and Portugal before the Inquisition, carry a mixture of Middle Eastern and Iberian ancestry. But here's where things get even more fascinating. Despite these local influences, the genetic core of Jewish populations remained distinct. Scientists found that, on a genetic distance scale, Jews are more closely related to each other, even across continents, than to the non-Jewish populations they lived among for centuries. An Ashkenazi Jew from Russia is genetically closer to a Sephardic Jew from Turkey than to a non-Jewish Russian. A Yemeni Jew shares more ancestry with a Moroccan Jew than with a non-Jewish Yemeni. This finding was a direct contradiction to the assumption that Jews had simply blended into their host populations. Another long-standing theory, the Khazar hypothesis, suggested that Ashkenazi Jews weren't originally from the Middle East at all, but instead descended from a Turkic people called Khazars who converted to Judaism in the early medieval period. This idea, used by some to disconnect Ashkenazi Jews from their Middle Eastern roots, was put to the ultimate test through DNA analysis. The results? Virtually no genetic evidence supported a Khazar origin. Ashkenazi Jewish paternal DNA overwhelmingly matched Levantine and Near Eastern populations, not Turkic or Central Asian groups. Even mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed down from mother to child, revealed a fascinating pattern. Studies found that around 40% of Ashkenazi Jews descended from just 4 maternal ancestors, women who lived over 1,000 years ago. Some of these maternal lineages appear to have European origins, suggesting that Jewish men migrating to Europe in ancient times took local wives who converted to Judaism. But despite this, the overall genetic structure of Ashkenazi Jews still shows deep Middle Eastern ancestry, proving that even with some outside contributions, the Jewish lineage remained intact. Perhaps the most astonishing discovery came from studies on Jewish priestly lineages. The Cohen Modal Haplotype, a Y chromosome marker passed down through male lines, was found in a significant percentage of Jewish men who identify as Kohanim, descendants of the biblical high priests. This genetic marker links modern Kohanim directly to a single male ancestor who lived in the ancient Middle East over 3,000 years ago, further reinforcing the continuity of Jewish lineage. So what does all this mean? The scientific evidence overwhelmingly supports the historical and religious narrative that Jews originated in the Middle East and maintained genetic continuity despite centuries of exile and migration. While Jewish communities did mix with local populations to varying degrees, their genetic identity remained intact, and their shared ancestry with ancient Israelites is undeniable. The old assumptions have been replaced by hard data. Jewish identity isn't just a matter of culture or belief, it's also deeply rooted in genetics. Science has not only confirmed the long-held traditions of Jewish history, but has also revealed just how resilient and interconnected the Jewish people truly are. For centuries, Jewish history has been pieced together through religious texts, archaeological findings, and historical accounts. But today, science is rewriting the story in ways never imagined. Thanks to advancements in ancient DNA research, We now have direct genetic evidence that sheds light on the origins and migrations of Jewish populations, revealing a far more intricate past than previously understood. One of the most groundbreaking discoveries came from an unexpected place, a medieval Jewish cemetery in Erfurt, Germany. Scientists analyzed DNA from individuals buried there centuries ago, uncovering distinct genetic subgroups within the Ashkenazi Jewish population. Some carried a stronger Middle Eastern ancestry, while others had genetic markers more common in Eastern and Central Europe. This discovery confirmed that Ashkenazi Jews emerged from a blend of diverse ancestral sources, yet maintained a remarkably distinct genetic identity over time. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. Ancient DNA extracted from remains in the Levant, dating back to the First Temple period, provided an even more direct link to the past. These samples, identified as belonging to the ancient Israelites, contained a genetic signature consistent with modern Jewish populations. What's remarkable is that these samples showed a mix of early Canaanite, Mesopotamian, and Anatolian influences, demonstrating that the Israelites were not an isolated group, but rather a dynamic population shaped by centuries of migration and interaction with neighboring civilizations. Further supporting this, research on the Samaritans, a small but ancient community in the Levant, showed a striking genetic continuity with these ancient Israelite samples. Unlike other regional populations that experienced extensive genetic shifts due to conquests and migrations, the Samaritans remained largely endogamous, preserving a lineage that closely resembles that of their ancestors from over 2,000 years ago. Beyond the Levant, DNA studies have also helped trace the migrations of Jewish communities across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Samples from medieval and ancient burial sites indicate that Jewish populations carried their distinct genetic signatures even as they integrated into different societies. Yet, despite living among vastly different cultures, Jewish communities retained a core genetic heritage, reinforcing historical accounts of endogamy and cultural continuity. These breakthroughs are transforming our understanding of Jewish ancestry. Instead of relying solely on historical narratives, we now have tangible, scientific proof connecting modern Jews to their ancient roots. Every newly analyzed DNA sample adds another layer to this complex and fascinating story. Every human carries two types of genetic inheritance, Y-DNA, which is passed down from father to son, and mtDNA, which is inherited exclusively from the mother. These genetic markers act like historical footprints, allowing scientists to trace the deep ancestry of populations. For Jewish communities, they reveal an unbroken link to the ancient past, offering insights into both paternal and maternal lineages that have shaped Jewish identity for millennia. The Y-DNA of Jewish men has provided some of the most compelling evidence of shared ancestry. Studies show that a significant portion of Jewish men, including Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jews, belong to haplogroups J1 and J2, lineages that originated in the Near East thousands of years ago. These haplogroups are common among Middle Eastern populations, reinforcing the historical connection between Jews and their ancient homeland. Among the most fascinating findings is the Cohen Modal Haplotype, CMH, a genetic signature found at high frequencies among Kohanim, the hereditary priestly class. This suggests a common paternal ancestor dating back over 3,000 years, aligning with biblical traditions of priestly lineage. On the maternal side, mtDNA analysis tells a slightly different story. While Y-DNA traces male ancestry back to the Middle East, mtDNA reveals more regional diversity. Ashkenazi Jewish maternal lineages, for example, have been linked to a small number of women who lived in Europe around 1,000 years ago. Some studies suggest that these women may have had local European origins before assimilating into Jewish communities, while others propose an older Levantine connection. Meanwhile, Sephardi and Mizrahi Jewish mtDNA maintains a stronger continuity with the Middle East, with lineages closely resembling those of ancient Levantine populations. One of the most remarkable aspects of Jewish genetics is the level of genetic similarity across Jewish populations despite centuries of migration and separation. Even with different historical experiences, whether in Eastern Europe, North Africa, or the Arabian Peninsula, Jewish communities maintain a distinct genetic profile that sets them apart from their non-Jewish neighbors. This is due, in part, to to high levels of endogamy, the practice of marrying within the community, which has preserved key genetic markers for generations. Another surprising discovery comes from haplogroup R1A-M582, a paternal lineage found in approximately half of Ashkenazi Levites. Unlike other Jewish Y-DNA lineages, this marker is rare in the Middle East and more commonly associated with regions of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Its presence among Ashkenazi Levites has sparked debate, with some researchers suggesting a potential link to the Khazars, a medieval Turkic people who are thought to have converted to Judaism. However, further genetic analysis has shown that this particular branch of R1A likely has Near Eastern origins, dismissing theories of large-scale Khazar ancestry in Ashkenazi Jews. Shared genetic markers across Jewish populations confirm a common ancestral origin, while also highlighting the impact of historical migrations and local integrations. Whether through the Y-DNA that ties Jewish men to the Levant or the mD-DNA that reflects diverse maternal influences, these genetic signatures tell a story of resilience, adaptation, and deep historical continuity. Jewish history is one of movement, forced exiles, voluntary migrations, and resettlements across continents. But beyond historical records, DNA provides a deeper, more objective look at how Jewish populations moved and mixed over thousands of years. By analyzing genetic signatures, scientists have uncovered a complex web of migrations that shaped Jewish ancestry in ways that written history alone could never fully capture. One of the most significant findings in Jewish genetic research is the extent of admixture, or genetic blending, that occurred during these migrations. While Jewish populations across the world share a core Middle Eastern ancestry, their genomes also reflect interactions with local populations in the regions where they settled. For instance, Ashkenazi Jews, who established communities in Central and Eastern Europe, carry a noticeable component of Southern and Northern European ancestry. This suggests that, while Jewish communities largely remained endogamous, some degree of genetic exchange with local European populations occurred, especially through maternal lines. Similarly, Sephardi Jews, who traced their roots to the Iberian Peninsula before their expulsion in the late 15th century, exhibit a genetic profile that includes contributions from both the Levant and Southern Europe. Their DNA also reveals historical connections to North African Jewish communities, who themselves show genetic links to Berber and Arab populations while still maintaining a distinct Near Eastern genetic core. The story is different from Mizrahi Jews, who remained in the Middle East for centuries. Their genetic makeup shows far less admixture with European populations, reinforcing their direct continuity with ancient Israelites. Communities in Iraq, Iran, and Yemen, for example, share strong genetic similarities with local Middle Eastern groups while still preserving markers that distinguish them as a unique population. This continuity challenges assumptions that Jewish groups evolved separately from their non-Jewish neighbors and instead highlights a shared ancient regional ancestry. Another key revelation comes from studies on Jewish populations that settled in more distant lands. The Bene Israel of India, Ethiopian Jews, and even the Lemba of southern Africa all display genetic connections to mainstream Jewish populations, but with varying degrees of local admixture. The Lemba, in particular, have fascinated researchers due to their oral traditions claiming Jewish ancestry. DNA studies have confirmed that some Lemba men carry Y-DNA haplogroups common in Jewish populations, particularly among the Cohen priestly lineage, lending credibility to their historical claims. While genetic studies confirm Jewish migration patterns, they also reveal how these movements were shaped by historical events. The destruction of the Second Temple, the expulsion from Spain, and waves of persecution in Eastern Europe all left distinct genetic signatures in Jewish DNA. Population bottlenecks, when a small group forms the basis of a much larger population, are especially evident in Ashkenazi Jews, whose ancestors underwent severe reductions in numbers before expanding rapidly, leaving modern Ashkenazi Jews with a highly unique genetic profile. Despite admixture and migration, Jewish communities worldwide have maintained a strong genetic link to their ancestral homeland. Even after thousands of years, their DNA tells a story of survival, adaptation, and enduring heritage. The interplay between migration and genetic continuity underscores a remarkable fact. While Jewish populations have moved across the world, their roots remain firmly tied to the land from which they came. The study of Jewish genetics has already revealed groundbreaking insights, but the future holds even more potential. With rapid advancements in genetic sequencing and artificial intelligence, scientists are now able to analyze ancient DNA with greater accuracy, uncovering details about Jewish ancestry that were once beyond reach. These discoveries could reshape our understanding of how Jewish populations formed, how they adapted to different environments, and even how they survived some of history's most turbulent periods. One of the most exciting developments is the ability to extract DNA from ancient remains with minimal degradation. Until recently, researchers relied mostly on modern Jewish populations to infer their ancestral origins, but now, direct analysis of ancient Israelite and Near Eastern DNA is possible. This means scientists can compare modern Jewish genomes with those of people who lived thousands of years ago, providing a more precise timeline of migrations, admixture, and genetic continuity. Recent studies on ancient remains from Israel and the surrounding region have already confirmed that the core ancestry of Jewish populations is rooted in the Levant, but future research could provide even deeper insights into how historical events shaped Jewish genetic diversity. Another key area of research is the study of rare genetic markers that persist across Jewish communities worldwide. While scientists have identified several distinctive haplogroups associated with Jewish paternal and maternal lineages, new genome-wide analysis techniques could help uncover previously unknown links between Jewish groups. For instance, by mapping out the full genetic landscape of different Jewish populations, researchers may be able to determine with greater precision when and where certain genetic bottlenecks occurred, or how much intermarriage influenced Jewish genetic variation in different eras. Advancements in bioinformatics are also allowing for more sophisticated population modeling. By using machine learning algorithms, geneticists can simulate past migration patterns, reconstructing how Jewish communities spread and mixed over millennia. These models can help answer lingering questions, such as whether certain Jewish populations emerged from multiple waves of migration, or whether specific genetic traits were selected due to environmental or cultural factors. Another area of intense study is the impact of Jewish genetics on health and medicine. With the rise of personalized medicine, genetic research is playing an increasingly important role in identifying predispositions to certain diseases. Ashkenazi Jews, for example, have a higher frequency of certain inherited conditions due to historical founder effects. As research expands, scientists hope to develop targeted treatments for genetic disorders that disproportionately affect Jewish populations, while also identifying protective genetic factors that may contribute to longevity and disease resistance. The field of Jewish genetics is also sparking ethical debates. As technology advances, so do concerns about genetic privacy, identity, and the potential misuse of genetic data. Who owns genetic information? How should discoveries about ancestry be interpreted in cultural or political contexts? As researchers push forward, they must navigate these ethical challenges carefully, ensuring that genetic findings are used responsibly and do not reinforce harmful stereotypes or misinformation. Ultimately, the future of genetic research on Jewish origins is about more than just uncovering the past. It's about shaping the future. By better understanding Jewish ancestry, scientists are not only solving historical mysteries, but also contributing to medical advancements, preserving cultural heritage, and deepening our understanding of human migration and adaptation. The coming years promise to bring even more revelations, confirming once again that the story of the Jewish people is far from over. It is still being written, one genetic discovery at a time.